21st, 2021 marked not only the beginning of the Biden administration.
Joe Biden said on January 20th of 2021, we're going to have open borders in America.
But also the beginning of the worst border crisis in American history. He claimed the immigration and border security policies of President Donald Trump were racist and bigoted.
We're going to have strong, incredible borders, and people are going to come into our country, but they're going to come into our country legally.
Joe Biden made it clear that if he won the presidency, he would effectively end those policies to ensure there would be unfettered, mass illegal migration into the United States.
What I would do as president, I would in fact make sure that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum.
Today, virtually everything at the border is controlled by the cartels.
America's opioid crisis shows no signs of abating.
95% of the fentanyl comes from our wide open southwest border.
More than 107,000 Americans died of drug overdoses in 2021.
U.S. Border Patrol stretched thin by record migrant crossings.
No, there will not be another foot of wall constructed on my administration.
Disturbing new images of the crisis at our southern border.
It's become a record-breaking year of border crossings. Most of those encounters, single men.
A seemingly endless stream of people making their way on foot towards the United States.
In 2021 alone, there were more than 2 million people who crossed the border illegally, and an estimated 500,000 people were successful at sneaking into the country. This crisis sparked a wave of illegal alien sex offenders, murderers, and other violent criminals crossing into our border. We don't know how many crossed into the United States, where they went, or what their intentions were.
The Border Patrol says that they estimate that 8 of 10 women that cross the border are raped. They estimate that number can be as high as 50% for trans or for gay men as well, or gay women. They also estimate that the children are being raped, children are being used as pawns and being sold into the sex trafficking industry here. You got to remember, like a human being, drugs you can sell one time, and then the consumer uses the drugs and that's it. But when you bring a child in and you traffic a child and you use them as a pawn to get somebody else in, and then they traffic them into the sex slave, that child can make them money over and over and over and over again. About a year ago, maybe within a year, we had a lady we caught. She had a baggie full of pills inside her backpack. We asked her what those pills were, and she said, well, when I was going to cross the border, I knew that I was going to get raped multiple times. These are morning after pills. I mean, where in the world did we lose our moral compass so bad as Americans that we put politics, because it aligns with your political ideologies, to have open borders? When did we get to a point where we put that over people? And that's what's happening, and that's what we deal with on a daily basis.
In addition to violent criminals and sex offenders, we have seen cases of individuals with ties to terrorism skyrocket during the Biden presidency. In 2021, there was a 4-fold increase in apprehensions of individuals who are on the terrorist watch list.
Anyone who claims that our open borders does not increase our national security vulnerability, they're simply lying to the American people, or they're willfully ignorant. Look, you don't have to take my word for it, although I spent 20 years in the FBI, and one of my positions was I was a special agent in charge in El Paso. From my window, I could see Juarez. But listen to Director Wray, who just in the past few weeks came out and said that the open borders is absolutely a serious and legitimate concern with respect to our national security. And also, let's look at the stats. This fiscal year alone, CBP has encountered, either at the ports of entry or in between, over 50 illegal aliens that are on the FBI's terror screening database. They caught a suspected terrorist, which they released into the interior United States, and took him 2 weeks to apprehend. The FBI also disrupted a terrorist attack to assassinate a former president. And how are they going to carry that out? By smuggling additional terrorists through the wide open southwest border. The Border Patrol apprehends, under this administration, illegal aliens from 160 different countries. Yeah, the national security threat along our southwest border is real.
In 2021, the United States saw the highest deaths by opioid overdoses in our history. Opioid overdoses are responsible for killing more Americans than the total number of Americans killed during the Vietnam War.
It's not a coincidence this same year or years now that you've had historic illegal immigration, which has caused up to 70% of Border Patrol agents to be pulled off the line to deal with these family groups. Not only to process, to make hospital runs, to make NGO runs, to make airport runs, bus runs. Up to 70% in some sectors have been pulled off the line. And when they get a huge surge, even more are pulled off the line. So the same year you have that many Border Patrol agents pulled off the line, opens the border up for the cartels to move narcotics through. So like I said, it's not a coincidence, same year historic illegal immigration, historic overdose deaths. The DEA is on record saying 95% of the fentanyl is coming across the southwest border. And why is so much coming across? Because, as I just said, the border is wide open because Border Patrol agents are overwhelmed with this immigration crisis. The criminal cartels, I've done this for 35 years, so criminal cartels in Mexico are smart. They'll run a huge group of family groups, whether it's 100 or 200 family groups in one area. Knowing that would overwhelm the Border Patrol pull resources from other parts of the border to deal with that humanitarian crisis. And that's when the cartels, once they get the Border Patrol tied up over here, that's when they move the drugs. That's when they move the gang members. That's when they move the criminals. That's when they move the people that don't want to be arrested, that don't want to turn themselves over to the Border Patrol, that pay the cartels a little bit extra. So when they created this, this Biden administration purposely created this immigration crisis, they also created a public health crisis with drugs. They created a public safety crisis with the criminals and gang members. And they certainly created a national security crisis because the border is wide open.
Drugs aren't the only thing that Mexican drug cartels control along the southern border. When an illegal alien crosses the border, they must pay the cartels for passage. While most illegal aliens don't have enough money to pay the fee charged by the cartels to gain entry, the cartels often threaten family members left behind by the illegal alien and thus can control the illegal alien. We have seen caravans in the thousands attempt to cross our southern border. The demographic of illegal border crossers has changed dramatically since the surge of 2019. Documentation discarded by illegal aliens in Yuma, Arizona indicates that they have come from more than 100 countries. Many fly to the tourist area of Cancun or into Mexico City. They then travel to Mexicali, and then they take a bus supplied by the cartel, or sometimes even Uber to the border just the other side of Yuma, Arizona.
One of the hot points, or the most trafficked area in the Yuma sector. And as we walked along, we've been able to find lots of ID, lots of money, anything that could be used to identify a country of origin. Many of them have taken out a visitor's pass or a Mexican visitor's visa in order to establish themselves in Mexico so that they can pass through the country without being bothered. And most of those people, when they get here to this point in time, they discard any and all ID. That ID is proof that they've established residency within the country of Mexico. Each one of their IDs costs a minimum of $100 all the way up to $250. So we can see that there is a large amount of money that's changing hands as these people are passing through Mexico. We also find a lot of medications in these areas, and it's not uncommon to find medication that's prescribed for some of the worst maladies. So we know people are coming here for help oftentimes, but some of them are coming here and people who should actually be institutionalized based upon the medicine that we found here along the border, which is really scary. And many of these people are actually coming across the border, walking through our communities, walking into people's homes at times, and camping out. So I am very grateful that we've completed a few sections of this wall. We now have better operational security here in Yuma, primarily because of the containers, because it funnels the individuals coming across the border to one specific point where Border Patrol is able to coordinate and dedicate 2 or 3 individuals for the people coming across, and it's freed up Border Patrol and Homeland Security in other areas so they can focus on the bad actors and the criminal element and the amount of narcotics coming across. That number, for example, this year so far, year to date, we've already exceeded, I believe, 300+%. And now the cartel is trafficking younger children with the new rainbow-colored fentanyl. It's very, very, very important that we secure this border and that we deny entry to the cartels as they traffic in the human person crossing and the drugs.
Illegal immigration imposes serious financial costs on healthcare services. At Yuma Regional Hospital in Arizona, illegal aliens have cost the hospital more than $20 million through the first 6 months of 2022. The Biden administration won't pay it, and frankly doesn't care about the financial distress charged on the Yuma Hospital, or in fact, any medical provider in any other American community. For many, the trip isn't always through air and transit through Mexico using a Mexican tourist visa. Their trip begins in South America. Individuals and family units work their way around the continent and gather in South American countries like Colombia, Brazil, and Chile. They make their way through Panama, where they trek through the rugged and just treacherous terrain of the Darien Gap. That gap is infested with local criminals who violate, assault, or rob those who are trying ultimately to get to the United States. Those who survive and make it into Panama are bused to the Costa Rican border in a program that is designed to control the release.
Darien Gap is very dangerous. It's one of the most dangerous places on earth. It's about 60 miles of no roads between Panama and Colombia, and it's just wild jungle, including the Indians who live out there, who kill migrants pretty much every day. It's literally the law of the jungle. So if the jungle doesn't get you, often the Indians do. So you'll see just huge numbers of migrants coming in from way over 100 countries, maybe 140 or so, and it's increasing month by month. The push and the pull of migration is what causes this, right? So we see people coming in from Asia and from Africa and from the collapse of South America, all collecting up there in Colombia, and that's where they enter the Darien Gap. And so when you enter the Darien Gap, you're under the care of some cartel members to begin with, and that's where the robbery begins. But then you enter the Darien Gap and you have to cross over 3 mountains. Actually, you're crossing over the Continental Divide that goes right through the United States. And so one of the mountains that people cross over is called Montaña de la Muerte, the mountain of death. And on that mountain, many people fall. And so then once you get through that, you have to go what's called the 3 crossings, cross over 3 different rivers, and many drownings, and many people camp by those rivers, and they get washed away in the flash floods. It's pretty, it's a rainforest and with mountains, so flash floods are pretty severe. And now you're back into Indian territory where Kuna and Imbra Indians just go hog wild on them and kill a huge amount of migrants, rob them, and that sort of thing. And then if you make it out, now you come into the camps at San Vicente and Las Blancas, and there you'll be put on buses and taken up to Costa Rica. And then you're in, at that point, a program called Controlled Flow, which is a program between Panama and Costa Rica, which was initiated and negotiated by the United States between Panama and Costa Rica. And Controlled Flow is an operation so that the flow of migrants is more or less smooth, right? So it's like an assembly line almost.
We have watched families and ostensible families casually walk across the southern border to surrender to Border Patrol agents. This practice is being seen as the Biden administration has re-implemented a pre-Trump program of catching and then releasing many of the individuals who cross illegally into the United States.
A program where we would send individuals back to Mexico, or they'd have to remain there in order to be able to look at their claims. It was less individuals would do it at the time because there's not an incentive to get released in the United States. You remove the criminal element of allowing individuals to get detained or be sent back. And now what has been happening during the Biden administration is everyone is allowed to claim asylum. It's a free-for-all. There's so many individuals coming into the United States knowing that they're going to get released. And the problem is a lot of these times, these individuals are saying that their claim for asylum is financial. That is not a true asylum claim. What you're seeing under the current administration is a lot more lawlessness than what you saw under the Trump administration. Under the Trump administration, individuals would get detained, and many times they'd have to remain in Mexico until their cases were heard. Under the current administration, individuals are getting released in the United States. A lot of their court cases are, years from now, so we don't know if they're going to show up, and that seems to be the biggest issue that we're having right now. Is they know, come across, claim asylum, and you will get released. And realistically, they won't show up to a lot of these court cases. Maybe not in our generation, but many future generations are going to get affected. And that's part of the problem. Under the Obama administration, there was a lot of individuals that were detained, and we have not yet been able to track where they're at. Even more so now in the future, where are these individuals going to be? How many are there? And what are their intentions in the United States?
In addition to re-implementing catch and release, the Biden administration made two other policy decisions that proved to be instrumental in creating the worst border crisis in American history. The administration acted to halt all construction of the border wall along the southern border, leaving debris and construction in piles all along the border to rot and pollute the land, causing even more environmental damage to the already trash-infested border. The administration also ended the Remain in Mexico policy, arguably one of the most significant immigration policies ever. And it played a pivotal role in deterring illegal immigration. 1 out of 10 asylum seekers are granted asylum because they have a legitimate claim. That means 90% of all asylum seekers have bogus claims. International law says that asylum seekers must seek refuge in the first safe country in which they arrive. Many asylum seekers do not do this. They bypass several countries to try to get into the United States. That is known as country shopping, and that is not the intention of the asylum process. The Remain in Mexico program helped end country shopping by requiring asylum seekers to remain in Mexico until their court date, instead of granting them immediate entry into the United States, where they then could get lost and never reappear for their court hearings.
I think that the most influential and helpful two things that were done in the last administration, the Trump administration, that were incredibly helpful. One was the Remain in Mexico policy. I feel like the Remain in Mexico policy was incredibly helpful because those folks that are coming across and throwing up their hands asking for asylum are then given trial dates to come back and face the asylum issue in court. But almost none of the people come back for those court dates. They just kind of fade off into our society and blend in. And it's become a huge problem. The Remain in Mexico policy basically said that when you're asking for asylum, that you have to stay on the Mexico side of the border until your court date. And a lot of those people who were not really folks that would qualify for asylum anyway, and I think they knew it, would end up turning back and going back to where they came from. If we were able to get back to a Remain in Mexico and finish the wall, I think that when we were building the wall, that was also a deterrent. And I think that those two things would probably have more impact than just about anything.
I'm the sheriff here in Cochise County, Arizona. For the last 18 months, going on almost 2 years now, we have seen an increase in our border activity, a huge uptick in public safety and criminal activity. In my county, we deal with almost 100% of gotaways. These are people that are being smuggled by the criminal cartels to come in our country illegally, which are people that can't give up like you see in other parts of the southwest border, or people that are aggravated in criminal activity or been recently deported or deported in the past. They're camouflaged from booties up to headgear. It's usually about $7,000 per person to be smuggled in the country. You get 3 attempts to come in. Then they're picked up by smuggler drivers. We're getting approximately 900 to 1,000 smuggler drivers per month coming to Cochise County to drive them from Cochise County to Maricopa County. They get paid $2,000 per person, the smuggler drivers. So 4 people, you're looking at $8,000. Very lucrative criminal activity. That has changed the quality of life here in Cochise County. It's decreased it, eroded us. In the last 3 months alone, we've had 67 pursuits. Border-related costs just in our jail, just under $900,000 in 3 months. That's what it costs the rural citizens of Cochise County for border-related crimes in our jail. It's not a good thing going on here in Cochise County and along the southwest border. The border is not secure, folks. As Ronald Reagan said, a country without border is not a country.
My name is Jim Chilton. My ranch is adjacent to the international boundary, and the wall was being built, but Biden shut it down when I had a half a mile to go. I have 5 miles of the international boundary. I also have cameras out, motion-activated cameras, and the last few years, I averaged every 6 months 130 people coming through my ranch. And the last 6 months, 1,467, 10 times what we witnessed 2, 3, 4 years ago.
Well, I was, my thought was, is there another way to do this without tearing up this beautiful country? But since it's done now, I think we need to finish it. And it's a huge boondoggle if we don't finish it. And right now it's got a lot of openings that have never been closed, although it's been promised. Nothing has happened, and that needs to take place. Otherwise, it's a total waste of the taxpayers' money.
While Joe Biden serves as the figurehead for his administration, much of the administration's immigration policy is spearheaded by Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Alejandro Mayorkas is an open border radical that serves in Biden's cabinet as Secretary of Homeland Security, a position that serves as the Chief Enforcement Officer of immigration law in the United States. I have filed impeachment articles against Mayorkas. He has deliberately dismantled the nation's border and immigration policies and is a threat to the sovereignty and security of our nation. Secretary Mayorkas is failing to faithfully uphold his oath of office.
He's the Secretary of Homeland Security, and from the moment he took that job, the Homeland's less secure under his leadership.
His abandonment of his duty is willful and purposeful.
Secretary Mayorkas, there's no question in my mind he should go. He should be impeached.
Do you believe that right now there's a crisis at the border?
I think the answer is no.
Humanitarian crisis and a policy clearly in need of reform.
I want to repeat my assurance to our audience this morning that the border is in fact secure.
The number of migrants stopped at the southern border set a record last month.
The border is secure.
One of the country's deadliest human smuggling cases in recent history. 46 people found dead in the back of this stifling truck. Likely cause of death, heat stroke.
You're either accepting the Biden administration, and if that's the case, then you should be impeached. If you disagree with the Biden administration's program, you should resign.
This chaos at the southern border can end, however. I have 2 pieces of legislation that help restore operational control at the southern border. The first is the Stopping Border Searches Act, which addresses the loopholes in U.S. immigration law that are serving as magnets for searches of aliens at the border. This bill fixes problems caused by the Flores settlement. That prevents the Department of Homeland Security from detaining family units for more than 20 days and ensures that unaccompanied alien children are quickly and safely returned home, and promotes increased integrity in the asylum system. The second piece of legislation is the Fund and Complete the Border Wall Act. This bill fully funds, completes, and pays for the border wall while giving Border Patrol agents the resources they need to do their jobs. Combined, these two bills improve the situation at the southern border and must be passed by my colleagues in Congress. We have the solutions teed up and ready to go.
You know, one of the things that gets overlooked that the Trump administration did, of course, we had Safe Third Country, we had a number of other things, but the biggest thing they really did was they followed the law. And right now we have a Biden administration who has completely usurped the law. And they've really turned the whole rule of law on its head and are really blatant and overt about it because they know they're not going to be held to account by our Department of Justice right now. I and many others have called for Mayorkas to be impeached over this, and really that should be the beginning of a lot of circumstances. I've sat in meetings where he's lied to our face about what's going on at the border. He's completely denied people being sent across the United States. He plays dumb on these sorts of things when he knows exactly what's happening. It's undeniable. Anyone who knows anything about the border knows what's happening, and frankly, it was predictable.
The Biden border crisis continues to rage on with no end in sight. We're not even halfway through the Biden presidency, and we have witnessed record numbers of illegal alien encounters, drug flows, and limited deportations of those who have broken our laws.
I'm about as far from the southern border as you can get in the United States, but the impacts of the Biden border crisis are felt right here in northern Wisconsin. The first trip that I took to the southern border was a little over 2 years ago to Arizona, and we saw how things were improving. The wall was being built. Sheriffs in Arizona were happy with their interactions with the federal government, and they were beginning to really see progress. And then you fast forward, the next trip I took down to the southern border was in April of 2021, and things were literally falling apart, and it's continued since then. Joe Biden has turned our federal government into the largest human trafficking operation in the history of mankind. Stop the pull that's coming, that's causing people to come to America and cause all the damage to the United States. You know, come to northern Wisconsin where I live and see the damage that's being done to the fabric of our society. In the little county I live in, northern Wisconsin, Oneida County, for the first time, fentanyl drug overdose deaths, I would call them poisonings, have exceeded any other cause of death amongst young people. We even have mayors now in New York City and Washington, D.C. saying, stop, no mas, we can't take this anymore. So even some Democrats are beginning to get the message that this is a horrible humanitarian crisis that's going on that is also compromising our national security.
Make no mistake, this was the Biden administration's intention from day one. It has led to a crisis of epic proportions, and if Republicans do not step up, this crisis, this catastrophe will only get worse. It is time to act. We cannot wait.